Why would a referee retire immediately after officiating the biggest match of his entire career? That is the question surrounding Slavko Vincic after the 2026 World Cup final between Spain and Argentina. The Slovenian referee had just stood in the middle of one of the most important games football can offer. A final involving Spain, Argentina, Lionel Messi, and a trophy that would define an entire generation. Spain eventually won 1-0 in extra time after Ferran Torres found the net in the 106th minute. Argentina finished the match with 10 men after Enzo Fernandez was sent off, and the scenes after the final whistle became almost as dramatic as the match itself. Then, only days later, Vincic announced that his refereeing career was over. That timing immediately raised questions. Why walk away at the absolute peak of your career? Why retire immediately after the biggest assignment of your life? And what really happened during those extraordinary 120 minutes? Now, before we go any further, there is an important distinction that has to be made. The dramatic story surrounding this final contains allegations about secret instructions, a supposed bribe, Messi, FIFA, and a deliberate Argentine decision to lose. Those claims have not been independently established as fact. What is confirmed is that Vincic refereed the final. Spain won, Fernandez was sent off, tensions erupted afterward, and Vincic subsequently retired. But the allegations surrounding those events have created a story that has spread rapidly because some of the moments from that final were genuinely difficult to explain. And that is where the story begins. Vincic was already one of the most experienced referees in European football. He had handled major Champions League matches, enormous knockout games, and some of the biggest occasions in the sport. His appointment to the World Cup final was historic because he became the first Slovenian referee to take charge of a World Cup final. This was supposed to be the ultimate reward for an elite career. Instead, it became the final chapter. Argentina entered the match carrying enormous expectations. Messi was playing what many fans considered his final World Cup match. Spain were determined to finish their tournament with another trophy. And for 90 minutes, something strange happened. Argentina could not find the breakthrough. The team that had been among the tournament's most dangerous attacking sides suddenly looked unable to produce the decisive moment. Spain controlled important phases of the game, the pressure continued to build, and eventually the final moved into extra time. Then came the incident that changed everything. Enzo Fernandez challenged Pau Cubarsí and was shown a red card. Argentina were reduced to 10 players at the worst possible moment. And only minutes later, Ferran Torres scored. Spain were ahead. The stadium exploded. Argentina were suddenly facing defeat. And then came the post-match confrontation. Spanish celebrations collided with Argentine frustration. Players from both sides confronted each other, and the atmosphere became increasingly aggressive. From the outside, it looked like an emotional reaction to losing the biggest match of the tournament. But according to the dramatic allegations surrounding the game, there was supposedly another explanation. The story claims that Argentine players were allegedly trying to tell their Spanish opponents something unbelievable, that Argentina had deliberately allowed Spain to win. Again, there is no reliable evidence proving that this happened. But as a narrative, it completely changes the way people look at the final. Because if such a claim were true, then the strange moments throughout the match would suddenly appear very different. The story begins with allegations of controversial refereeing decisions throughout the tournament. Supporters had questioned several calls, and some fans believed Argentina had benefited from favorable decisions. Those controversies eventually became part of a much larger online narrative suggesting that FIFA wanted Messi to receive another World Cup trophy before his international career ended. The allegation goes even further, claiming that certain officials were supposedly placed under pressure to assist Argentina whenever necessary. But once again, these are allegations, not established facts. There is no credible evidence showing that FIFA secretly instructed referees to manipulate the tournament for Argentina. Still, the story's most dramatic moment comes just before the final. According to the narrative, Vincic allegedly received an unexpected visitor at his hotel. The mysterious man supposedly entered the referee's room and delivered a message. Argentina had to win. Spain could not be allowed to take the trophy. And then came the alleged offer. A blank check. The story claims Vincic was supposedly told to write down any amount he wanted, with the money allegedly promised after Argentina won. It sounds like something from a political thriller rather than a football tournament, and there is no verified evidence that such a meeting or check existed. But in the version of the story being circulated, Vincic allegedly did something unexpected. Instead of accepting the offer, he supposedly wrote an amount on the check and kept the document as evidence. According to the claim, he believed the paper could eventually prove what had happened behind closed doors. And that allegedly created a second problem. Vincic now had information that could potentially affect the biggest match of his career. So the story says he needed to tell someone, and the person he allegedly chose was Lionel Messi. According to the narrative, Vincic secretly established contact through someone connected to Messi's circle and eventually managed to meet the Argentine captain privately. What supposedly happened in that meeting is the heart of the entire story. Vincic allegedly told Messi about the supposed pressure on referees, the alleged instructions, the mysterious visitor, and finally the blank check. Messi, according to the story, did not explode in anger. He supposedly remained silent. And then came the twist. The narrative claims Messi already suspected that something was wrong. Not necessarily the exact details of the alleged offer, but the strange decisions and controversies throughout the tournament had allegedly made him uncomfortable. According to this version, Messi believed that winning a World Cup under questionable circumstances would not feel like a real victory. And that is when the story claims he made a decision that would completely change the final. Messi would supposedly gather the Argentine squad and tell them that they had to sacrifice the match. They would play normally. They would fight. They would press. They would defend. They would make the entire world believe they were trying to win. But they would supposedly avoid taking the decisive opportunities necessary to actually finish the game. It was not about openly surrendering. It was about quietly refusing to cross the final line. And if the match remained level deep into extra time, the story claims that one player would have to make the ultimate sacrifice by receiving a red card. According to the narrative, that player was Enzo Fernandez. Imagine the pressure of that decision. A young midfielder, a World Cup final, millions of people watching, and supposedly knowing before the match that one moment could turn you into the villain of the entire night. This is where Enzo's emotional reaction before kickoff becomes part of the mystery. Cameras captured him visibly emotional before entering the pitch. To the audience, it looked like nerves. It looked like the pressure of playing the biggest match of his career. But the dramatic version of the story claims those tears carried another meaning. It claims Enzo supposedly knew what he had agreed to do. He allegedly knew that he might have to accept the blame for Argentina's defeat. He allegedly knew fans would criticize him. Analysts would replay the incident, and the red card could follow his name for years. Yet, according to the story, he accepted that burden because Messi had asked the squad to protect the integrity of the game. Then the match began. Argentina attacked. Spain defended. Both teams fought for every ball. Nothing about the opening stages openly revealed any secret plan. And that is precisely what makes the allegation so dramatic. Because if Argentina were supposedly trying to lose without making it obvious, then everything had to look authentic. Every sprint had to appear real. Every challenge had to look competitive. Every defensive movement had to look normal. But when the decisive moment arrived, Argentina allegedly would not finish it. 90 minutes passed without Argentina finding the goal they needed. The clock kept moving. The tension increased. And then extra time began. Spain could sense the possibility of victory. Argentina could sense the danger. And according to the alleged storyline, this was the moment when the supposed plan reached its most controversial stage. Enzo Fernandez challenged Cubarsi. The referee showed him a red card. Argentina were down to 10. To millions watching, it looked like a disastrous mistake. A midfielder had lost control at the worst possible moment and left his country fighting with one fewer player in the most important match of the tournament. But the story claims that was exactly what had supposedly been agreed before the final. And only minutes later, Spain found the opening they needed. Ferran Torres scored in the 106th minute. Spain went ahead 1-0. Argentina had to chase the game with 10 players. The final whistle eventually arrived, and Spain were world champions. But according to the allegations, Vincic's emotions at that moment were completely different from what viewers might have expected. Instead of simply feeling the disappointment of a final ending, he allegedly felt relief because the result had supposedly gone according to the sacrifice Argentina had chosen. At the same time, he supposedly felt sadness because Messi had allegedly given up the chance to end his World Cup career with another trophy. But again, that is the dramatic interpretation of the story, not a verified account of what happened inside the Argentine camp. Then came the post-match chaos. Spanish players were celebrating one of the biggest moments of their lives. Argentina were devastated, and suddenly, tempers exploded. Players confronted one another. Voices were raised. Bodies were pushed. The situation became ugly. According to the narrative, however, some Argentine players were supposedly attempting to explain the alleged truth to their Spanish opponents. They wanted them to know that Argentina had supposedly sacrificed the game. They wanted them to understand why the match had unfolded the way it did. But imagine hearing something like that seconds after winning a World Cup. To the Spanish players, such a claim could sound ridiculous. It could sound like an excuse from a defeated team trying to reduce the value of their opponent's achievement. Spain had fought through 120 minutes. They had scored the winning goal. They had lifted the trophy. And suddenly they were allegedly being told that their opponents had intentionally allowed them to win. That would feel insulting. It would feel like someone was trying to steal the meaning from the greatest achievement of their careers. And that is how the story explains the confrontation. Not as simple anger from Argentina, but as a misunderstanding between two teams that supposedly understood the final in completely different ways. Vincic, according to the dramatic narrative, watched the chaos unfold from the middle of the pitch. He allegedly wanted to intervene and explain everything, but realized that a post-match confrontation was the worst possible environment for such a revelation. If the allegations were true, the truth could not simply be shouted across a football pitch. It would require evidence. It would require time. And it would require someone willing to speak. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Vincic retired. He had reached the summit of refereeing. He had officiated the World Cup final. He had received major recognition for his work. And then he decided that his career was finished. His retirement itself is real. The timing is real. The extraordinary claims about secret instructions and a blank check, however, remain unverified. In his public comments, Vincic has spoken about the magnitude of the final and has also indicated that conversations he had with Messi should remain private. That is a very different thing from confirming the allegations circulating online. And this distinction matters because the football world is full of stories that become more dramatic every time they are repeated. A controversial decision becomes a conspiracy. A strange reaction becomes evidence. A private conversation becomes a secret confession. And eventually, a theory can begin to sound like a confirmed event even when nobody has actually proven it. The alleged blank check is the perfect example. If such a document really existed and could be authenticated, it would obviously be extraordinary evidence. But without the document, without independent verification, and without credible testimony establishing who supposedly delivered it, it remains an allegation. The same applies to the claim that Messi ordered Argentina to lose. There is no reliable evidence publicly establishing that the Argentine squad deliberately sacrificed the final. There is no confirmed proof that Enzo Fernandez volunteered for a red card. And there is no established evidence that FIFA instructed Vincic to manipulate the match. What we actually know is much simpler, but still fascinating. Spain won the World Cup final. Ferran Torres scored in extra time. Argentina ended the match with 10 players. The game produced emotional scenes afterward. And Slavko Vincic retired shortly after the tournament. Those facts alone are enough to make this final one of the most memorable matches of the year. But the conspiracy surrounding it has transformed the game into something even bigger. Because the allegations ask us to imagine a completely different story. A referee supposedly placed under pressure, a legendary captain supposedly choosing integrity over glory, a young midfielder supposedly accepting the role of villain, and a World Cup final supposedly sacrificed so that football itself could remain clean. It is an incredible story, But incredible stories require incredible evidence. And until that evidence appears, the responsible way to discuss these claims is to separate what is known from what is alleged. Maybe someday more information will emerge. Maybe someone will produce evidence that changes the entire conversation. Or maybe the story will eventually disappear into the enormous collection of football conspiracies that have surrounded the sport for decades. For now, Spain have the trophy. Argentina have the defeat. Messi has another unforgettable chapter in his extraordinary career. Enzo Fernandez has a red card that will be remembered whenever people revisit the final. And Vincic has walked away from refereeing after reaching the highest stage possible. Whether the final contained anything more than what millions of people saw remains unanswered. But that unanswered question is exactly why people keep talking about it. Because sometimes the most powerful football stories are not the ones where everything is proven. They are the ones that leave you staring at the screen and asking one simple question. What really happened when the cameras were not looking?